The future is now in the NCAA, and BYU has an opportunity to differentiate themselves early on in this new era of college athletics. How do they do that, and what is changing? We're talking about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you once again for being in what we like to call an everydayer right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. This is your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars, and we are brought to you today by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, use the promo code Locked On College for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. All right, let's dive right in. We've been talking about it over the past week or so about the pending agreement from the NCAA to settle an antitrust case under the title House versus NCAA. Now, some of you who are everydayers know what I'm talking about. For those of you who don't, there has been an antitrust case out there essentially saying that the NCAA unfairly precluded athletes from participating in NIL opportunities and they essentially are trying to get back damages for athletes dating back to 2016. Now, the agreement, which was formally agreed to by all Power 5 conferences and the NCAA's Board of Governors this week, is going to pay out nearly $2.8 billion over the next decade to roughly 15 to 25,000 athletes who participated in NCAA sports between 2016 and 2020. And the whole crux of the case was that these athletes, once again, were not able to participate in NIL opportunities like athletes beginning in 2021 up until the current time have been able to do so. What does that mean for BYU? Well, I've talked often, for those of you, once again, who are everydayers, about BYU finding advantages when it comes to highlighting what BYU is all about. Now, there are inherent advantages BYU has. There's also inherent disadvantages that the Cougars have as well, especially when it comes to recruiting and selling what BYU is to prospective athletes who are considering going to BYU. Well, the situation with this case is, yes, there is going to be those damages that are absolutely going to take a hit in the pocketbook for all college programs, especially those in the Power 5 ranks. I know, by the way, BYU is a member of the Power 5. So you're going to see a reduction in the payouts from the NCAA over the next decade, which is going to hurt BYU. But the thing is, BYU's been making more money since joining the Big 12 than they ever have at any point in the history of their athletic department. And BYU really doesn't know anything different. So they'll be able to absorb that hit better than a number of other power level programs are going to be able to. There's a number of power level programs who, I'd say actually more than the majority, operate at a deficit. And the fact that they're going to have to potentially see less money coming to them from the NCAA, well, that's a major hit to their books. Now, the other part of this, which I think is a big advantage for BYU here, is that there is a part of this settlement that's got a lot of new forward-facing rules for the NCAA and how they're going to operate going forward. The biggest one is revenue sharing. I've talked about it often on this podcast that the next round of NIL, or whatever you want to call it, was the fact that schools were going to be able to compensate their athletes directly. The whole thought of amateurism was a complete farce to begin with, but it is officially dead. Beginning in 2025, next year, everybody, BYU and other programs in the NCAA, especially at the power level, are going to be able to spread between $20 and $22 million annually to their athletes inside their athletic department. Now, how do they go about distributing that? Who gets the money, etc.? That remains to be determined. Title IX will obviously play a role in this. You can't essentially say it's all going to BYU football. It's all going to, you have to distribute it evenly along Title IX guidelines on that. But it is going to be a big part of the budget now in high-level college athletics. And BYU has to look at this and say, okay, how much are we able to afford? Where can we cut back? How much can we spend? Because the $20 to $22 million, it's not a hard and fast rule. You have to spend that amount of money, as I understand this lawsuit and the pending settlement. Essentially, the schools can set however much money up to that cap of how much they want to revenue share with their athletes. I am advocating, this is Jake Hatch speaking, that BYU pay out the full amount. If you can pay $20 million, pay the $20 million. If you pay $22 million, you pay the $22 million. Differentiate yourself. They're going to be the big dogs in college athletics, the Ohio States, the Bamas, the Texases of the world, who are going to be able to do that and not have a second thought about it because their operating budget is just that massive. BYU doesn't have an operating budget that massive, but BYU, I think, as they are early on in their Power 5 tenure, can adapt their budget to absorb this and make it a big part of it. There are going to be other programs who are on the quote-unquote same level as BYU who are going to be so strapped for cash with all of this going on. Like I said, less in payouts from the NCAA. And oh, by the way, trying to come up with potentially $20 million in your annual budget to pay to your student athletes, that they're going to be struggling with that. BYU, if they can afford to do so, and I would hope that they can find a way to do it, they can become one of the premier power players if they can have that in their back pocket. Say, yeah, we pay out the full amount of our revenue to our athletes. That is a recruiting advantage BYU should absolutely aspire to get to when it's available beginning next year. Will they get there? TBD, but I hope that BYU is talking. Tom Holmoe, Brian Santiago, C. Shane Reese, the University Brain Trust and Athletics Brain Trust that runs BYU Sports. I hope they are meeting, and they will be meeting in coming days and weeks to talk about this and find a way to do that. The distribution will be an allocation, obviously, at the school's direction. I'm interested to see how BYU were to go about it, but get on top of it and find a way to be able to pay out as much money, if not the entire amount that you're capable of paying out every single year. The other thing I'm looking forward to here is there's changes coming to scholarships and particular rosters for athletics. What's going to happen here is they're eliminating scholarship caps in college athletics from the NCAA. A number of you know that there are programs that have a full ride scholarships. Those are the football and basketball programs that they have to pay out full ride scholarships. There are other sports like baseball in particular that you have 30 to 40 man rosters who are splitting 11 scholarships. That was the old format under the NCAA. Well, gone are the 11 scholarship cap, but there's going to be an implement of new roster limits, which will be coming. So potentially you could see BYU baseball being essentially limited to 30 to 35 players overall, but you now have the ability as an institution to provide scholarships to an entire roster. So in theory, BYU could take whatever the cap is on BYU baseball. I'm using it as an example because it was across the board for any sport that BYU has. That BYU could say, okay, now every one of those athletes in BYU baseball is going to be a full ride athlete. Now it's going to take millions of dollars of investment to be able to obviously do that. But I would hope that BYU is able to fund and endow, that's the best term to use, endow as many scholarships as possible, because that's an advantage as well. If a guy like Trent Pratt for BYU baseball can go out on the recruiting trail and tell a young man, yeah, you may be looking at half scholarship there. I've got a full ride scholarship for you at BYU. That's a major boost for BYU's recruiting efforts in baseball. It could be the same thing for BYU women's soccer, volleyball, tennis, swimming and dive, whatever program you happen to root for at BYU. It's going to change the whole dynamic of this. Now, there's also a change coming to football because there's a potential roster reduction coming to as few as 85 roster spots. That meaning essentially the walk-on part of college football may be dead and gone because they would cap it at 85 roster spots, and currently you have a cap of 85 scholarships in college football. That is the one downside to this, but Title IX does apply to all of this, and I do wonder how BYU can differentiate themselves once again, and it is essentially to identify which sports that you want to, I guess, prioritize, and how many scholarships can you allocate, full ride scholarships can you allocate to those programs to give BYU another advantage. Now, one other note real quick is there's going to be new governance structures coming into place, that there's a potential new Division I subdivision for increased power conference rulemaking that could come into effect as a result of this. Also, flexibility for leagues to set some of their own rules. So the Big 12 could do something different than the Big 10, the ACC, and the SEC, changing things for BYU. And then also the revenue sharing model, which is currently slated for the next decade, over 10 years, could be extended beyond that period. So there is a lot of change coming for BYU. There's a lot of change coming to the NCAA. But once again, I am advocating from my chair here in my studio, saying that BYU, we talk often about you guys wanting to have an advantage in terms of what you can do to differentiate yourself. Well, pay out as much money as you can to your athletes. I know that's a major hit in the pocketbook for BYU athletics, but It's a way, once again, to be among the quote-unquote big dogs right from the get-go. And then also, once again, identify which sports you are capable of funding more scholarships for and find a way to generate as many scholarships for those sports as possible and help them rise to a higher level. There's been a lot of angst around BYU baseball and their failings this year. Well, guess what? In the Big 12, it's going to be tough sledding if they are continuing to have to deal with partial and not a full allotment of scholarships moving forward here under this current model. We'll see how it goes, but I think BYU has an opportunity here to be a differentiator by themselves and essentially say, no, we're willing to play ball. And the nice part is the Cougars, once again, they're finding more money coming into their coffers than they ever have before. We'll just reallocate that and get yourselves into a spot where you're not essentially having to go back and try and scrounge up every figurative penny and nickel and dime that other programs are having to do to come up with this money. You can essentially, from the get-go here, as a power level program, be on the same footing as maybe some of those quote-unquote big dogs because you planned right, you run at a you run in the black is the best term for BYU. The vast majority of power level athletic departments run at a deficit. They run in the red. They spend more money than they actually bring in. BYU athletics, we've talked about this often, does not get money from main campus, BYU or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They do not fund BYU athletics. I don't know how many other trolls can claim that it's otherwise, but it's not true because I know the people who know. But regardless, BYU eats what it kills, and they've always had to operate in the black. It is a big, big opportunity in this day and age with the NCAA changing at a breakneck speed right now for BYU to essentially say, we're here and we're here to play and start doing things like a big dog here and essentially make it a part of your core identity at BYU to be like that. It's going to take some investment. It's probably going to take some extra donations, maybe from some boosters to get those scholarships and the like in place. But get on it and get it done and be a part of it when it's right at the outset. Don't wait for 2030. Don't have a goal of getting to that level. Do it beginning in 2025, if at all possible. And I believe it would be a major boost and a major advantage for BYU if they can get on top of this and make it part of who they are moving forward here in this new era of BYU in the Power 5/Power 4 and the Big 12 Conference. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about a new addition to the BYU football program, a new verbal commitment coming from the left side of the lake out here at Westlake High School. Who is Sale Fano? We're talking about him next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys with it being winner take all time in the NBA and NHL playoffs. They want to give you a shot to bring home the biggest win of your own. And the best part is right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Think about that. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and much, much more. Think about it this way. You put some money down on maybe one of those NHL games or an NBA game. You win the $150 with your $5 initial investment. Take that $150 and place it on the over or the under of BYU at 4.5 wins this coming fall and let it ride throughout the season. You could cash into a very, very large degree if you take the over or the under, no matter where you're at. And you can do that as simple with just a winning $5 bet. It's a really, really fun way to get in on this. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on to make every playoff shot count. Once again, $150 on that $5 initial investment of a winning bet. So take advantage of it now. Once again, it's FanDuel.com/locked on to get started today. It's all courtesy of FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. You're sick of watching ESPN or Fox and having all those talking heads who are quote-unquote embracing debate, screaming at each other and having to turn down the volume. I want you guys to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel with all the news to bring you the biggest stories every single day without the screaming going on the other networks. Locked On Sports Today brings you campus analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube, are also available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, BYU football got another commitment yesterday from Sale Fano. Now, that last name should sound familiar. Yes, he is related to the Fanos who spurned BYU, are now at the University of Utah. Logan, most notably, having spent a period of time at BYU before transferring to Utah. Spencer was a standout player at Timpview High School, but ultimately just signed with Utah. But their cousin, Sale Fano, decided he is going to wear blue rather than red in the rivalry. It comes to BYU by way of Westlake High School. Now, those of you who know me, I live in Saratoga Springs, where Westlake High School is located. Now, I had heard about Sale last year, and he was a very intriguing athlete to me personally because watching his tape, he has got the height and weight combo you want as a premier pass rush / outside linebacker type in this BYU defense. He is listed at 6'4", between 210 and 220 pounds, and he looks like he's quite skinny at that with his frame. So there is a potential to bulk him up to 6'4", 250, maybe make him a defensive end when all is said and done. But what I love about Sale Fano is he brings a pass rush element that BYU is still continuing to look for. We talk about it often. BYU's inability to get after the quarterback has been absolutely crippling for their defense over the past 3 to 4 seasons. And Jay Hill last year, he talked about wanting to get more pressure on the quarterback, but the simple fact of the matter is they did not do that. It's going to take time to get it right, but you can never add too many talented pass rushers. And I believe Sale Fano has the capability of contributing in that market. Now, the question I have for Fano is, does he have definitive mission plans? I have not been able to scrounge up that information, so that could change things. It could obviously see him as a member of the 2025 recruiting class. He may not enroll at BYU till 2027 or 2028, but you look at his tape, he's a mid 3-star talent, 83 according to 24/7 Sports. But this is a kind of a low risk, potential high reward type addition for BYU. He was starting to get some Power 4 interest. Washington State had offered him recently. He's also had offers from New Mexico State, UNLV, Utah Tech. Hawaii was also in the mix, according to what I'm reading on 24/7 Sports. But what I see from Fano is a guy who is just coming into his own. He is not a polished prospect by any means, but doesn't mean that he's completely raw either. This is not BYU of yesteryear under Elisa Tuiaki and Ed Lamb taking a guy who is maybe wholly unfamiliar with the position and saying, all right, we'll train him up over the next 3 to 4 years, and by the time he's a senior, he'll be able to contribute for us. That's not what Sale Fano is. Sale Fano has got some very, very nice tape to him, but the good news is it feels like he's just scratching his potential here. There is an opportunity to really bring him into BYU, mold him into what you want him to be, whether it's a stand-up 2-footed pass rusher or a down 3 technique defensive end, whatever you want him to be. He can be that. That is the possibility with a skill set like Sale Fano. He fits a lot of what BYU is looked for in athletes on the defensive side of the football. Once again, you can't teach 6'4". You can't teach a guy who carries 210 pounds and actually, frankly, looks skinny out there on the football field. You watch him on his highlight reel, and he shows a really nice ability to diagnose plays, shed blocks, and go make the tackle. He's unafraid of contact. He loves making plays in the backfield. So you look at this and say, okay, this is a really savvy pickup for the BYU football program. And it just kind of goes more to what Jay Hill, as BYU's defensive coordinator, it's what he's ascribed to since he arrived in Provo. He's talked about wanting to have an attacking defense, a defense that can get pressure with 4 men up front, maybe even 3 men in certain circumstances, allowing the back end of BYU's defense to obviously hold up in coverage and be much better than they have been. It's going to take time for the mix of BYU's defense and Jay Hill's philosophy to get it right. But adding guys like Fano here of his ilk, that's a great, great addition because you continue to pile athletes onto that roster. That is going to pay off in dividends down the road when you get it right. So the hope is that there is an improvement on defense this year for BYU, and Fano will not be part of that. But the good news is, as BYU starts to understand what Jay's asking of them, they get better athletes like a Fano on this roster. You're going to see better product on the field. And we all know that BYU's defense, it's been a major, major liability for them over the past 2 to 3 seasons. I think it can become a very, very nice strength for the Cougars, provided they are given the runway to get it right. And I think that Fano, he's picking BYU because he sees what BYU has in store for him. So I like the pickup. I think it's a savvy pickup. And I love when I have kids from my figurative neighborhood getting an opportunity to go and play for BYU. I'm a kid from Utah Valley. I love seeing kids from this valley put on for the university that's located here in Provo, Utah. So congratulations to Sale Fano and the rest of the Fano family on this commitment, and looking forward to seeing him continue to develop this year. And now I've got even more of a reason to go out and check out more Westlake football games this fall as well. I'll just say that. All right, coming up here in just a minute, we're going to round out today's show with a couple of notes on a BYU basketball prospect that I think some of you may know about, other ones may not. And I'm going to lift the lid a little bit on who Egor Demin is, and we're going to get to that next as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. If you guys want to get out to NBA playoff games, really any other event you have interest in, you can do it with our friends at Game Time. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying your NBA tickets. If you've been planning on going to watch, whether it's the Pacers or you want to see the Celtics out here in the West, if you want to see the Mavs take on really anything you want to do in the NBA, you can do it with our friends at Game Time. The best part is they've got priority last-minute deals. Save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and much, much more, including the NBA playoffs. So take advantage of that. Also, have the Game Time ticket coverage. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry, and they make it as simple as possible. It's an easy-to-use app. 2 taps, your tickets are purchased, and you're on your way to the game or whatever other event you're going to. So take the guesswork out of buying your game NBA tickets today and do it with our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Once again, terms apply. Again, create that account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's Locked On College for $20 off that purchase, your first purchase, excuse me. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you're not signed up already for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group, please do so. It's been a really, really fun thing to have alongside the Everyday Podcast. It's a great way to interact with the show. I'm sending out updates of what I'm hearing about BYU sports and texting you guys in live time. Like I said, it's a text. It really comes to your phone in the form of, if you have an Android, the green bubble, or if you're on iPhone, it comes, I think it comes still green bubble, but it's a text message. It can't get much more simple than that. You have to go to some message board. You have to log into some website to get the inside intel. It's coming to you in the form of a text message. Click the link in the show notes below, whether you're watching and or listening to this. 14-day free trial, $4.99 a month after that, and join us on our Locked On Cougars Insider group. It's been a really, really fun thing we're tracking here. All right, so some of you may know the name Egor Demin. Now, he is a 6'8" or 6'9" swingman from Russia who is playing over in Europe right now. Now, he has got a lot of bona fide NBA draft hype about him. There are a lot of people talking about him being a mid-first round pick next year in the NBA draft. Why do I bring him up? Well, more and more reports are emerging, and what I've talked with people about is that he does have an offer, at least interest on BYU's part in bringing him to BYU. Now, you'd say a guy's got NBA draft potential. That seems like a home run guy for BYU to go after. It just screams to me this is going to be more of what BYU basketball is going to be doing moving forward under Kevin Young. Kevin Young knows what he wants. He knows what he wants to accomplish, and he's got bona fide credentials. They can say to guys, I've helped develop X, Y, and Z players in the NBA. Let me do that for you. Now, obviously, they're still waiting the word on Chaz Lanier, and that'd be a very nice addition for this year if BYU can land him, but the reports say that Tennessee is in the lead there, so be it. If you can get Egor Demin, I take Egor Demin all day, every day, because what I see from this young man is he played, for Real Madrid. This comes from an NBA draft point yesterday. In the first day of ANGT, which I think it's an Adidas tournament over there in Europe, he had 19 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, 1 block, shot 6 of 13 from the field, 0 of 4 from three-point land, and 7-8 of his free throws. They said the 6'8" guard struggled from the three-point line, but made some big-time plays on offense to help Real Madrid tonight. Does mention he has offers from Illinois and BYU. Now, the original way I found about Egor Demin and the reported interest from BYU is because of Illinois fan sites. They're claiming that BYU is willing to foot $2 million in NIL for Egor Demin. I don't know if that's a legitimate number for BYU. Frankly, I'd be stunned if it is, because BYU's not really been one of those programs who's been willing to go to 7 figures for athletes. But if you can get Demin to come play for BYU, this would be an awesome pickup. He is a swingman of swingmen, and if his skill set is as advertised, he's as versatile as they come on the wing and has 6'8" height that goes with it. This is a very, very nice prospect for BYU basketball. What are the chances BYU lands him? It's anybody's guess at this point, but it sounds like he's playing well over there. And the thing about the tournament he's playing in, it's like Adidas, like next generation tournament for European, like young European stars. And if he can stand out in that field, we're talking about he's going up against fellow guys he'll be potentially playing against at the next level, whether that's in college or, more importantly, in the NBA. Yes, he may be a one-and-done type for BYU, but let's embrace it. If you can get guys of his talent and his caliber to play for the BYU basketball program, sign me up. I'm all over that because it gives me more to talk about, more to cover, obviously, when it comes to draft prospects and the like. But keep an eye on the name of Egor Demin, Egordemin. Now, if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, please let me know in the show notes or comments. Let me know how I'm supposed to pronounce it correctly. But I'm assuming it's Egor Demin, and we'll see how it goes. But it's more of the same from Kevin Young. I am just floored at what he has been showing as BYU's head coach. He has been absolutely awesome in terms of going out and being unafraid of going after the biggest fish in the sea that he possibly can find. And that should be celebrated. If you're a Cougar fan, this is exactly what you want for BYU basketball. There's some of you saying, well, BYU basketball is doing what BYU football is incapable of doing. I'm not saying that BYU football is incapable of it. I'm just saying that Kevin Young is coming and he is going for it all. There is no learning process for him. There's no saying, oh, we'll get to it when we get to it. No, he is hitting the floor running, and he is going to go out there and get the best roster he can possibly compile. And if you can get guys like Demin to come in, maybe the outside chance that Jackson Robinson or Chaz Lanier decide to return to BYU, you could have the makings of an absolute Big 12 contender on your hands. That is the potential of what BYU is trying to accomplish on the recruiting front right now. Will it pay off? And obviously, will they get all these guys? I have my doubts. I do harbor doubts that BYU can land a guy like Egor, because trust me, there's a number of other programs out there like Illinois who are probably going to be willing to pay a number of hundreds, if not millions of dollars in dollar bills to that young man to come play for their programs. But if BYU can win out that recruiting battle, it just adds to an already incredible run in the early tenure for Kevin Young, and would be just another feather in an already just like bountiful hat of plumage that he's wearing. I know that's a phrase that we use all the time, but it's really cool. Honestly, I'm stunned at what Kevin Young has been able to accomplish so far as BYU basketball head coach, but he has been an absolutely insanely successful hire so far. Now, there's a lot to prove, obviously, on the court as the head coach, making the decisions for the first time as a college Division I head coach, but that will come in time. Right now, all you can do, put together the best roster you possibly can do, and guys like Egor Demin would be a very, very big add to that roster, and we'll see how it all shakes out in coming days and weeks. All right. I think that's it for today. So a big thank you to all of you for your support of the podcast. As always, cannot thank you guys enough for your continued support of the show. Please continue to share, rate, review. Tell your family and friends about this podcast. It's free. It's available every single day. I cannot thank you guys enough for the support you've already given us, and please continue to do just that and help us build this audience as well. So until tomorrow, thank you once again. Not tomorrow, actually. Until Monday, unless some news comes out, then we'll sit down and do an emergency edition. But until then, thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Thank you to all of you once again who are everydayers, and we will talk to you guys again soon, right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.